Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're doing an After Dark episode talking about the Expanse Book 7, Persepolis Rising. If you haven't had a chance to read it, get on it. It's the first book of the series that was not trans or made into the TV show. So we'll talk about that and a few
Yeah,
other things. And yeah.
go from there. And yes, and while you can obviously read it, and we do recommend reading the book, for those of you who don't feel you necessarily have the time to sit down and just read a book and want to find other ways to access it, you can always get the audiobook version, which is available across most streaming platforms. I know I listen to book 6 and parts of book 7 on Spotify. I believe that Apple has them as well. And as far as I can tell, it's all the same like individual reading it. Whomever they've got for this series, that's just it. So, and I forget what his
Nice.
name is. He does a pretty nice job with his narration and his consistency. So I really enjoyed what I heard. So maybe that's another option that you might want to explore. Um, I don't know how some people feel about audiobook. How do you feel about going the audiobook route? Have you listened to any books that way?
So I don't usually do audiobooks because I love having physical copies of books. Even like the e-readers, I don't have those, don't want them. I love having the books. I love having a massive shelf of just books on books. Like that is my one of my favorite things. I was an English major in college, so I love having uh, a just a giant library of books, and I try to have multiple things. I have fiction, nonfiction, biographies, history. So yeah, I love having physical copies. So I usually listen to podcasts. So that's what I do, like in my car when I'm driving, is I'm listening to
Mhm.
podcasts, and yeah, that's what I'm doing usually.
Well, I was definitely in that same camp. I love to have the physical copies of the books myself. I have my own little library as well, but I am still in the process of putting my stuff back together, following the move. So I will not be able to turn my camera and show you my impressive display. Mine is more it's just a mass of books that are like, okay, there'll be like a stack of books over here in this corner, then there's some over on my desk. There's some beside my bed on my nightstand that I kind of oh, tonight I want to read fiction, nonfiction, whatever it is. Grab one through there.
Right.
Books in the kitchen, books in the living room, books in my daughter's room, which it's debatable on whose books those are because I needed a place to store stuff, and then of course she's got books.
Right.
So my goal is to, as a gift to myself, sometime around Christmas time, is to get my bookshelves and everything together and then put my books away properly.
Right.
But haven't done that just yet.
Right.
Um, but I will say for the efficiency part of being able to access the book from anywhere is a big help. Like when I went to Kentucky this past summer, I drove. I chose to drive, and that was a 15-hour drive. And what a great way to really kind of get through some books and to
Yeah.
access things. Because obviously you can't read and drive, but you can certainly listen. So
Right.
that was very handy. And then with me, upping my routines with the gym and trying to find time to do all of these things, again being able to have the audiobook accessible while I'm running or whatever it is that I'm doing, and having the headphones on and being able to listen while doing those things really helped. And I found that it was actually beneficial to my workouts as well, because it kind of took me out of everything else and gave me something to focus on while I was actually doing the work. So that was a really cool experience to have. So that's why I've kind of gone a more borderline. So it's like if you definitely have the time
Right.
to sit and enjoy the weight of the book and everything. Like I still bought mine, even though I was listening to it as well.
Right.
You know, um, yeah, definitely do that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But at the same time, if you know you're going to be on the go and you can't really, pack it with you, or you're not going to have time to sit anywhere and really just read it, and you want to be able to get through things, kind of like on the same thing of a podcast. A lot of people listen to podcasts on their way to work, as part of their commute or something like that. This book series would be another great thing that you could listen to in very much the same way, you
Right.
know. and and it works. I think it works.
There
So
there's
um,
one that you mentioned whenever I go to the bookstore to buy the books or just to look around, um, they have been recently introducing anniversary editions of the books. And you might have seen them, but they are new covers. But they also like they'll have like the first book has a lot is pink on the edges. Like it's not just this white edge. It's got a brand new cover, which seems to be inspired by the TV show of like a bright pink look on the for the first book, and then like the just there's new editions that are currently out, collector's editions. That part of me is like, oh, I'd love to have the collector's editions, but I have the series in hardback already. I don't need the new editions. But
mm,
started reading right before I started introducing the new editions, and of course, we're well beyond where they have been they're re-releasing one book a year. The 10-year anniversary of each book, which would of course take way too long for us to collect them and make it worth reading. But if you have a chance out there, anyone who's interested in reading the books, you could take advantage of the new collector's editions and get the pretty awesome looking collector's editions they got going.
and they do this for several series of books every so often. I know that I think a couple years back when the release of the first Dune movie came out,
Mm,
they did
mhm.
the same thing for the Dune series, and you could
Oh,
get
yeah.
them, and they were the large hardcover books with the gold embossing on them and
Oh,
everything.
yeah.
They were very pretty. And
Yeah.
then I remember when I was in high school and the Lord of the Rings movies were first coming out, they did the same thing with those books too. And again, that just very kind of like old school styling, and they had
Yeah.
the gold edges and
Yeah.
the long the
Castle.
inserted bookmarks and the tassel. They did such a great job on them. And I mean, I was a high school kid. I wasn't going to buy those, but thinking back on it, I wish I had,
Yeah.
because they were beautiful books.
Mhm.
And in later years, I did go and like look and try to find them, and I mean, I found other, like, I guess, versions of that, but I've never been able to find that particular style for them, which has always kind of stood out to me. So yeah, if it's something that you're interested in, you also, besides just reading the stories, you like your books to have a certain look, a certain aesthetic, I would definitely check out those things, because chances are it's not going to come around again for quite a while.
Right.
So I mean, like that Lord of the Rings thing, that was 20 something years ago, and it still stands out in my head, and I haven't seen it since. So, but yeah, just check those out. Now, obviously, we are going to be talking about Persepolis Rising tonight, and we're also going to kind of get into some other things that are, Trek related, Trek adjacent, because this is a Star Trek podcast, so it would be, wrong of us not to talk some Star Trek. But yeah, our
For
main
sure.
focus is, for the most part, going to be this book. Now, I will say, um, I did not quite finish the book. I know, but on that, what I mean by that is there were a couple of sections toward the end that, as I was trying to get done so that we could do this show and everything like that, I know I kind of glossed over a couple of things. So I got to the end, but I feel like there's a couple of things towards the end that I'm a little hazy on. But I still want to
Sure.
discuss the book because, as you said when we were first starting tonight, this is the first book that takes place after the series on Amazon ends.
Mhm.
And when the series ended, and we hadn't even begun reading the books yet,
Right.
and when the series ended, we were just like scrambling when we found out that there were 9 books and they still they still had more to go and they weren't going to do it. My
Right.
question on my mind was always, why would they do that? What's the problem? And finally getting to this book, I feel like it answers that question, but you have to realize what you're reading in order to see why it answers that question.
Right.
And so I'm eager to talk about that with you. In fact, since I've already brought it up, let's just start there.
Yeah.
Um,
Just do a plot recap.
yeah. Um, so yeah, basically, this book, as we already know, as we've said many times, takes place 30 years after the after book 6, right, and after the series ended on Amazon.
Mhm.
Find out all about our favorite characters. They're still alive, but obviously they're older, and the state of the, I guess, universe or the sol system is vastly different, and we see the
Right.
emergence of a, I they want to classify them as a new threat, but the way they go about things is really different. They come in with overwhelming force, but as much as they have this overwhelming force, they're not necessarily, or at least at first, keen to use it until certain things kind of kick off for them. And even then, like their response is always kind of immediate and devastating, kind of to express the point of them being the superior force. And we find out that their leader has been experimenting with the protomolecule and with alien technology that he found in the gate that they've been inhabiting for the past 30 years. They've made some monstrous ships and some great technology and weapons, and they've got some super soldiers. And the leader, whose name High Counselor Duarte, we find out has also been personally experimenting on himself with the protomolecule and has
Yep.
augmented himself in such a way that it seems to have given him some extra abilities while also extending his life.
Right.
Um, so, with all that being there in this book, the reason that this one stands out for, I think, why they had to end the series where they did is this book is almost, you could almost view this as separate from what was going on in the other six. This is almost like a retooling of the story. We have to do our world building all over again. We have to
Right.
learn about new people, and even though we're hearing from the people that we know, Holden, Drummer, Naomi, Bobby, so forth and so on, there's a lot of things that are going on here with new characters like Duarte, Trejo, Singh.
Hmm.
These are people who are very integral to this story
Right.
that obviously wouldn't have existed, or as far as we know anyway, otherwise.
Right.
So, even with all that said, I'm going to say that I did not enjoy this book nearly as much as I enjoyed the other ones.
Yeah.
Um, could be because I was attached to those other characters and didn't like the fact that we just skipped out on 30 years of their life.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
or it could just be this book is a bit slow. And the one thing I've been asking for, again, David, you can vouch for here. I've asked for more protomolecule, and we really
Yes.
just didn't get it. Not until really towards the tail end of the book, and
This
even then is it's mid.
Yeah, this book. So the prologue starts with the character that actually we saw on the show, Cortazar. He's that scientist who had his brain messed with on the show,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't have like basically any morality that would stop him from following whatever scientific endeavors he was interested in. Like the morality didn't concern him because he had gone through a surgery that literally like messed up part of his brain. Anyway, that character is introduced in this book in the prologue. There was a short story about him in the short story compilation, but it's not important. All that matters is that he is the one that is doing all the experimentation on Duarte, the leader of the Laconian faction. Um, so yeah, this I'm forgetting where I was going with all that. Um, this the book is slower than the other books in the series, so I agree with you. It's not as fun. I didn't enjoy this one as much. It feels like, oh, that's what I was getting at. It's a setup for the last two books. The proto molecule doesn't show up much in this book, except briefly in that prologue, and then Holden at the end, who gets to meet Duarte. He's like, I can't believe you're stupid enough to experiment with that stuff on yourself. And Duarte's response, and this is the finale of the book, so we can go ahead and just talk about it, is to say, this is inevitable. This is inevitable that we're going to find the protomolecule or learn from it. So why
Mm-hmm.
run from it? We need to go ahead and just exploit it to the best of our abilities now.
And not just that, but he also says that he's very much aware that there is this other out there, and
Right.
that they need to prepare because he
Yeah.
knows that a conflict is going to come, and it's a tool. The protomolecule is a tool to use in order to bring humanity to the next level and to combat whatever may be coming. Holden
Right.
is of the opinion of we need to stop using this, to quit putting us on their radar. Basically, they don't know we're here. You're going to mess around. They're going to come in and wipe us all out. Stop
Right.
it. And Duarte's like, no, we're running full on into this. He
Right.
even says, storm the gates of heaven
Yes.
towards the end. So he's gearing up for a fight here
Yeah.
that he wants to turn all of humanity's attention towards.
Right. Should we do a full recap? You think should we do a full one, or just hit the
Uh,
highlights? Or
I'm fine with hitting the highlights because it's a lot. There's a lot in here. Because again, it's a lot of world building,
yeah,
and if you've been following along with the series at all, you're probably already
you
aware of
know
some
what's
of these
going
things
on.
too. So yeah.
Sure. Okay, fair
Um,
enough.
Now, so we have to talk about Governor Singh, of course. He is our newest main character that we see. He's from Laconia. He gets put in charge of going through the Laconian gate to Medina Station to
Right,
take over and to run it. And
right.
from what we see of him in the beginning, he starts off as this very tight, very controlled man. He's got a family, he's married, and they have a daughter that he's leaving behind in order to go and do this job. And he very much believes in the world as presented by Duarte. And he believes in this service and his dedication to that. But as we follow him through this story, would you agree that he kind of becomes unhinged, unstable a
Sing,
bit?
yeah,
Yeah.
Sing's character is the most interesting in the entire book because he's new. He's our kind of villain POV, but he's not presented in a straight up evil type way. He's presented as a young officer who's not skilled, put in a position above his skill level. Literally, he's not prepared for this mission. I honestly think that he was set up. I think he was actually set up to fail by Duarte. That's my theory, and that comes out in him making very rash and self-centered decisions. Whenever he feels like he's being challenged, he has emotional reactions that he has to try and tamper down. He's very insecure, is the word to
Hmm.
use there. So he's interesting because he's smart. He's a smart guy, but all of his instincts are wrong, as we come to learn, or at
Yeah.
least he's been taught things, but he can't implement. Well, there's a
They're
lot
not
there.
nuanced. They're
Yeah,
not nuanced, and
that's a
you're
good point.
right.
Yeah,
His reactions tend to be a bit more knee jerk, and then when people react to his actions, he becomes even more entrenched in this need to
prove
express
himself.
his yeah, and we see him get warned at different times. I forget the lady that worked with him first, who he has transferred, and
Right.
then even Admiral Trejo comes to him
Hmm.
and warns him about the transfer and being like, there was a reason she was here. You
Right.
didn't see it.
Yeah.
And now you've put yourself into a precarious position. And then instead of trying to, learn from it and grow from it and be better, he seems to insulate himself with more people who are less likely to question him, but also more likely to go down a more militant front, which is ultimately what he seems to be after. At least to me, he seems to want to have this ultimate authority, ultimate control, because that's the perception he got from Duarte, this
Yeah.
leader of immense power and strength. And he wants to be Duarte's proxy here on the station,
Right.
and is not does not do a good job.
Yeah, it's a really interesting idea because they come in from the Laconian system with this new powerful ship that's been designed with protomolecule technology, and it immediately wins the quick battle that occurs outside Medina Station. There's only one ship it goes up against, but it uses new technologies, some sort of magnetism that rips the ship apart that it attacks and instantaneously wins that fight. But Singh is supposed to be this student of Duarte, and he knows that occupations are supposed to be the most weak form of ruling a hostile area and or getting it to submit to your will. But that's why I think Duarte set him up to fail because he does everything wrong. He literally gets told, "Hey, you need to have a light hand," and instead he goes with the rough controlling hand over the population on Medina Station, which does the exact thing that they're worried would happen. It causes friction. It causes the underground to cause havoc that they can't ever get a handle on. And so when things go badly for them, they keep having to double down, and it just never ever works. Now, the only problem I have with that storyline is I don't know how well a light hand would have gone per se. What's interesting is that because he's left alone, is he doesn't have a lot of options presented to him about how to rule the station. If there is an underground terrorist movement, you got to find a way to stop it. You can't let terrorists blow up your station. The question becomes how. I'm not entirely sure how they expected him to have a lighter hand, I guess, other than just strictly you got to try and make it work.
You
Maybe
know,
that would have, but
and that kind of it works well to support what you said initially about him being set up, because he didn't come with all the tools that he needed in order to win. They showed up with overwhelming power but not overwhelming force,
yes,
and that's really what they needed, because I feel like when you're coming into position like this, and again, I have no military background whatsoever beyond family members who serve, but that doesn't really count for me personally.
right,
But just saying, if you want to come in and be this kind of benevolent overlord, which is how they tried to sound, at least in their initial messages, I feel like you need to be able to demonstrate that you have total control over everything else, which they never demonstrate that they have. They
right,
have a lot of power and they're very effective in the way that they utilize their power,
right,
but ultimately with things like that, I feel like it just literally it takes bodies, it takes people. You
right,
need the people that you're going to be occupying to see you everywhere.
right,
That's how they accept that this is the new norm,
right,
not you got a couple of strong-armed whatever individuals in strategic positions or whatever, because undergrounds form in your cracks.
right,
They find the places where you're not, and
right,
that's how it grows. And before you know it, they are the overwhelming force because they know where all the cracks are.
right,
So
exactly,
what he needed, like, and it seemed like at first that's what they were trying, because they had the station in complete lockdown. They had everything being monitored, but still there comes a time when you need people to start going about their day to day, and at that point that's when it's exposed that you've got those cracks.
right,
So really what they needed in the situation, I feel, was more people. They should have
yes,
shown up with a shipload, like they know the population of Medina. Let's say the population of Medina is 1,000.
right,
They should have showed up with 3,000
right,
and
yeah,
then put
100%,
all 3,000 on the station. To hell with what the station can handle. They
right,
should have overwhelmed the population and been like, you are more than free to go about your daily chores and activities and jobs and everything else. But we will literally be watching every move you make. And
right,
once you have learned our system and we know where all the cracks are, then you'll start to see a reduction in our force. You guys have
right,
earned our trust. Things are stable. So we don't need 3,000 here. We need 2,700.
right,
And then now from 2,700 to 2,200, and a
right.
gradual backing down as the new norm is
Is
established.
exactly. Yeah, and you know what backs up what you're saying is that it's made clear throughout the story that, for example, Singh trained on non proto molecule ships. So they do have a fleet of the older ships um, that could have come through the ring gate when the Laconians came through. They only brought two ships. They brought one of the new ones and one of the old ones. But if they had brought one of the new ones and then say 10 of the old ones, they would have had 10 ships to defend against the ring gates because they blow up the rail guns when they first come through.
Hmm.
And they could have also waited. Like the book makes clear that like they send that one new super powerful ship, the Tempest, but they have another two that are being made. One of them's almost complete. One of them is still pretty new. It's still being worked on. It's a ways away from being completed, is what I'm getting at. So they have one ship that's ready, one that's almost ready, and one that's not ready at all. If they had waited, say, 6 months, get the second one ready, they wouldn't have had all this. The whole point of the middle of the book is that they're afraid that when the new ship comes in that their little rebellion won't be able to do anything. So if the Laconians, who it's funny, Avasarala says Duarte is a master strategist. It's like I doubt that. I think
Well,
he's not.
and on that, and of course I'm going to defend her. I give her a pass because it hasn't reached him yet what Duarte has done to himself.
Right.
So she could be thinking of him from Duarte of the past, the
Right.
Duarte that she knew and had read about and whatever else from 30 years ago when he
Right.
disappeared and they found out that he was one that disappeared. What he has become in that time span, who knows what effect that's had on his brain and his thought process and so forth.
Right.
I think that this is also backed up by the fact that they did leave before all of their ships were ready. I think there is a I think we're going to find that there's a resource problem on Laconia. And they've even talked about the need to shift personnel, shift people to Laconia and stop making Earth the primary.
Right.
Um, um, yeah, and wanted that to be more on Laconia itself. I think there's a resource problem that we're gonna find out about,
Hmm.
and there's a need to shift things sooner rather than later because Duarte's preparing for a massive war on a scale that we have not seen yet, and
Right.
as the book was kind of intimating towards the end there. So I think that's why they left before they were ready. But in the end, it proves that it didn't matter because once the Tempest got through the Sawgate and was taking on all of the EMC's ships and everything else, more than a match. Even when they set off the nukes, it was
Right.
like no big deal there, and they were
Right.
able to wipe out the Palace Tycho station with ease.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Just put a beam through it immediately. Yeah. I I was as you were talking, I realized that I might have overstated a few things in my
Yeah,
little rant there
I
because
know it's fine.
they well, I was saying that like, well, why did they send the ship through so quickly? And I remembered now. Well, when they went through the first time, they realized when they used their beam weapon that it was sending out like gamma radiation through the ring gates. So they realized they could control the ring gates easily, and that they basically felt they could go ahead and send that first ship through toward Earth and Mars now. They wouldn't have to wait like they originally planned. So the original plan did have waiting involved. They decided to skip ahead, and that turned out to be, on some level, a mistake, at least for the Medina Station people, and for Sing especially. um, but I mean, their initial plan still does work. They conquer Earth and Mars simply by having that powerful ship that can just nukes don't affect. I mean, it comes out with minor damage after the combined fleet of Earth and Mars makes its final stand. Um, it's funny. I read the Three Body Problem series earlier this year. You might remember me talking about
Mhm.
that. There's a scene in I think it's the second book. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the second book where um, the aliens that they're fighting against send. It's not a ship. They call it a teardrop. It's this super relatively small, basically just this solid missile. There's nothing inside it, and but they're able to control it from a long distance and can turn it on literally a dime, even in the middle of space. And so it just destroys this entire fleet. This little, I mean, it's like 3 meters long. So when I say little, I'm not saying like hand
Yeah,
little, but like big little. Small compared to a full-sized ship, and it decimates everything. And so this scene is different, but it's that is the question that always sci-fi presents of if an alien being or alien fleet or alien society came with overwhelming force, what would we do? And
yeah.
that's what the Three Body Problem series is about. Actually, is what would happen if a overwhelming alien civilization was trying to conquer us? What would we do about that? So anybody
I
who
always
likes
love
this
that
should read that.
question. Yeah, I always love that question because I always it's to me it's one of those things that it gets asked a lot in sci-fi, and then ultimately I always find the answer to be so boring. Because ultimately the person who writes it gives us something that we can identify, that we can, that these aliens are here to oppress us, to subjugate us, or if they seem too good to be true, they are because they for all their technology and knowledge and everything else, they need something from us, and we're whatever. There's so many shows that do that. That show V that was out for a while there, that was their whole plot. The Falling Skies series on TNT was that way. The Independence Day movies, that's what it's about, the use of resources. The Borg and Star Trek, that's what they're about for all their other species they've assimilated and everything else. All of these things do that, and I feel like sometimes I would love it if somebody presented a completely different view, just
Mhm.
just one time. I don't even know what it would be, because I mean it would, like, again, totally different. I don't want to see where the powerful oppressive aliens come in and they want to wipe humanity out because our planet's so green and lush with life and they want our resources. No, don't give me that. How about you give me uh I don't know. They want to wipe us out, but they don't even know we're here, right? Like,
Yeah,
they exist many orders of magnitude above us. We don't register, just like the
that
various
would be interesting.
bacteria. Yeah, the various
Yeah,
bacteria and whatever else, that we step on every day, right? When you go outside, you put your shoes on, you walk outside, you're crushing countless billions of bacteria, right?
right,
Um, well, I mean, the same thing. They're just coming through. They're just passing through. Unfortunately, the nature of their passing will completely obliterate us.
right. So
Give me
yeah,
that
the
story.
the three body problem kind of does what you're asking for. It says that the alien species is they're afraid of dying. Their planet is unstable and they need to escape it. And Earth is the closest planet, or well, the Sol system is the nearest galaxy to them. And we've made the mistake of announcing that we exist and that they could come here and live here in our place if they because they're technologically ahead of us, and so they could destroy us if necessary. Um,
But see, even then, they're putting us on even the writers there are putting us on a level at least to be noticed. I'm talking about, just not at all. More like
oh,
when a
book three of the three body problem.
uh,
That's actually what happens.
oh, I was gonna,
There's
I think
there's
it'd
a
be
it turns out that like the bigger threat is like civilizations who are like, I don't care about any of
yeah,
that.
like the curiosity of a child when they see an ant for the first time. It's like, oh, what's this little thing?
Right.
And then it bites you and you squash it, and then you move on with your day. You don't give any more thought to that ant.
Yep.
I
Yep.
want I want that.
Yep.
I want to see how that plays out. And
That'd be pretty freaky. I guess that's kind of what
yeah,
Cthulhu is. Isn't that what Cthulhu is?
essentially, yeah. And that, isn't it, that it's always asleep and that we don't want it to wake up, because if it wakes up, we're over, we're done.
Yeah, I thought that's kind of the idea behind it. H.P. Lovecraft is like those beings are so above us that yeah, they literally that's the cosmic horror is that they don't care about our existence at all, not in a positive way or a negative
Negative
way.
way, right?
They like ants before a
Yeah,
foot, they could squash us without a care. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to recheck out Lovecraft, because I mean, I just think that kind of thing is interesting, because, like, again, so many stories that I read in sci-fi and shows that I watch, everything else, ultimately we break it down into terms of things that obviously relate to us and that we can understand. And this book, with its a more sci-fi take on an authoritarian regime coming through and basically kind of kicking freedom in the face a bit, you know. For as interesting a way that they present it in this book, it's still something that we have seen before. These societies, and even with, like, human societies that go out into space, and it's been X number of 100 years since, you know, contemporary time, and they always seem to fall back to a more militaristic trope. I would just like to see somebody do something different.
Yeah.
Um, Stop giving me the military perspective. What would it be like if humans went through one of the ring gates? We didn't hear from them for 200 years, and then they pop up and they are like the ultimate flower children or whatever, or not even that, but like they prove that the utopian form of democracy works, and they come through as this, ultra confederation of whatever, and they're all about freedom of expression and freedom of purpose and autonomy and sovereignty and so forth. And then they're coming back to us who we have the notions, but we're not on that same level. How would you interact with people who are that further along in that progress than we are, you know?
That would be really hard to write in the sense of like, how do you predict the future of civilization and then contrast it with modern civilization? It'd
Well,
be a
you're right, but
fantastic
but
idea.
yeah, but
Yeah,
we see people do it all the time, but it always comes out in this weird military or paramilitaristic thing. They do it all the time. Even Star Trek is guilty of it. I mean, we watch the show and it's set 400, 500 years in the future, but it's
right.
still a military organization. Captain, ensign, lieutenant, whatever. That's what it is. So somewhere along the way, it's like they're saying in order to form a utopian society, you must have this overwhelming adaptation of a militaristic mindset.
Well, again, it's funny you say all this because I'm thinking of the foundation books. So there are 7 books. The last 2 that he wrote were prequels. So the last book chronologically was book 5, and in book 5, it's revealed that the future of humanity is to become a part of a hippy dippy mind melding, hive mind kind of thing. And that's
Mhm,
a very heavy over exaggeration of what happens, but it works for this question. The idea is that humanity is gonna evolve to such a point where we can like literally like have a relationship with the inanimate objects around us. Like even inanimate objects have some sort of life to them that we can interact with. Like that's how bizarre it gets by the end of
mhm.
that series. Um, which is a okay, I mean, he's going with something new, to be fair. But anyway, the that's actually to be fair, that's actually introduced in book 4, and book 5 is about whether or not we want to accept that future,
Mhm.
which is also another thing going. But anyway, um, yeah. So there are books that I think have tried to address your concerns, but it's kind of hard to grasp a different angle.
I and I would
Military
like
is
to see
easy.
them. I right. I'd like to see them because I feel like the reason it's so hard to grasp is because we only ever really see this particular viewpoint. I mean, even the other 6 books in the story were about this one group trying to control another group, and using military force to do it, or using military and political forces to do it.
Right.
Um, to find something that would truly be different, to offer a different perspective of a path of a way to live life and to express yourself, I think would be very interesting. And I simply can't think of anything that even comes close. Everything I could think of, even the ones that try to start out that way, where it's like, oh, we are a loving coalition of worlds and societies, and we believe every voice matters, and if you join our federation, your voice will matter. You will maintain your sovereignty and autonomy. We just ask that you contribute to the group as we contribute to you. Sounds fantastic. But then the seedy underbelly comes out and it's like, yeah, by contribute we mean we're going to take a third of your children and expose them to intense radiation that feeds us for centuries, and we're going to decimate your whole population. Like it'll always be something like that, or yeah, we're going to, I don't know, make you all addicted to this weird drug and turn you into our fighting force. Congratulations. Like, it's always something like that
Just
that pops up.
yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Oh, you need help, you need resources, fine. We're going to give you everything you need. In exchange, though, you will work in our labor camps, and sure, we'll provide housing and medical and schooling and all the rest of that. But over time, that's all going to go away, and you're basically going to be our slaves,
Right.
Bajor. It's just that's what happens.
Well, it's interesting you say all this because once again, I'm trying to think of what can I say, and I'm like, well, the next book that the authors of the Expanse, they go by the pen
Tiamat's
name.
wrath.
Well, no, the next series. So James and S.A. Corey, the next book series they're writing, the first book is called "The Mercy of Gods," and the little blurb on the book cover says that humanity is one of, I guess, multiple races that have been. I don't know if conquered is quite right, but there's like this alien civilization that's above and in control of humanity, and there's a human who gets somehow caught up in something with this alien civilization. Like the idea is they are above us. Yes, they control us and they're tyrants of some sort, but is it a militaristic control or just a like a science control? I don't know. I haven't read the book.
Okay.
But maybe S.A. Corey, James S.A. Corey, they get the pin names for Abraham
And
and
Frank.
Frank. Yeah, let me get this right.
Daniel, isn't it Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank?
You got it. Yep. So I don't know. Maybe that'll be our next book series to read together. Is
Okay.
the
I look
Mercy
forward
of
to
Gods
checking
and
them out. Yeah, I look forward to checking it out because I mean, and it's not to say that I don't obviously that I don't enjoy these kinds. Obviously, I do because I've watched so many,
Mhm.
watched so many, read so many, tried to write so many, so forth and so on. But I'm just saying, like, I would like to see another way in which it could be done or presented, and yeah, I'm waiting for that. That's all.
Right, right.
So now to turn our attention back to the book itself and some characters, have to give a special shout out to the one and only Christian Avasarala. She is still alive and kicking in this book, even though she is super old and wheelchair bound. But she's still just as
Still
poignant
popping
and
pistachios, man.
right and irascible as ever. Still cussing like a sailor, even though she's old as hell. So
Yeah, I love
love
when it
that she was
says.
still there.
Yeah, I loved at one point when it said that she was pretending to be senile so people would go away. You
So
know?
people would leave her alone. Yeah. She pretends
But
to be the
yeah,
senile old lady in the back of the room, so everybody leaves her alone.
yeah, I said to you in text, and I think I mentioned it in the previous episode we did, but when she showed up and had a conversation with Drummer, I was like, I need this show to come back because I need these characters to have this conversation. It's every time Ava Sarala comes up in the book, it's Dashaloo, who I immediately hear the
Oh yeah,
voice of.
oh yeah,
Um, I forget the actress who played Drummer at the moment. Cara, no, it was Kara, right? It was a Kara
yeah.
something. I forget. Anyway, but the two of them,
Hmm.
of course, would have a great moment. Um, the one sad thing though is Avasarala, because she is kind of a background character in this book. She is there for Drummer, and she's in scenes with Drummer, and that's basically it. But she's kind of put on the back burner in this book. I don't want her character to die or disappear. So the one thing I'm afraid though for her character is I have read the blurb for the next book, and it says something about the daughter of Duarte is wrestling with the ethics of her father's choices. But in the book we just finished, she's at best like 12 years old or 10 years old.
She
So
was
there's like
10 at the end of the book. It said she was 10.
that's right. So and I remember her it's saying that because I remember thinking that's another 8 years if she's 18 now. If the book is implying that she's a young adult and she's having to argue with that, that means that Holden has been captured on Laconia for 8 years, away from Naomi for 8 years, which would
And
be
he was what?
devastating.
And he was like what? Early 50s.
I was thinking he
So,
was late 50s, maybe even 60, because I feel like the book was saying that he left the military somewhere around age 25. Got
mhm.
kicked out of the Earth military, and then there was probably some sort of time he's late 20s by the time the first book starts, and then it's about another 5ish years between the first book and the sixth one, at least, maybe more. So he was like mid 30s. Then you add 30 years onto that, and that would mean he was actually be in his mid 60s. As I want to say that I don't like that. I feel like 30 years was too much because you were right. The idea that for 30 years our characters have just been bumping around the universe and nothing's been happening doesn't make sense. There was
Especially after the explosion of the ring gates, there's 1,300 of them. You're
right,
the whole thing with the proto molecule. You mean it's all been completely silent for 30 years? Like
right,
it's and then not only that, but then to start the story at the 30-year point, you have effectively eliminated all of your characters because
Right.
we all know that they're too old to do anything major.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, 30 years was too much. 20 would have been pushing it,
Yeah,
in
I
my
agree.
opinion. I
I
think the
fully
sweet
agree with that.
spot, yeah, I think the sweet spot really would have been like 15
I
years.
think so too.
And then yeah, because 20 is, yeah, 20 is pushing it, 30 is way too much,
Yeah.
15 years. And I think that, I mean, we'll have to read the rest of the books, but it's possible they did this for a reason.
Mm,
So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe there's something
sure.
else that comes up that it turns out they needed it to be this way. But in that event, you need to have an exit strategy for your characters
Right.
because now you're talking about like the blurb it's saying something about Duarte's daughter because in this one she's 10. I know that she's 10.
Right.
So if she's wrestling with her father's decisions, that means she's come into her own at some point. She
Right.
has to be an adult, which you're being generous by saying 18.
Sure. Yep.
There's
Mhm.
no reason to think that she's not going to turn out to be 25. And we're looking
Right.
at a new generation of upstarts and
Right.
people who, whatever. So if that's the case, so now we're looking at a good 15 years
Right.
and all of our people are going to be out.
Right.
Abasarala is dead.
Right.
Um, no way Amos and Bobby are still, kicking around, especially with the way that Amos is in this book. Someone killed Amos. Amos will have died violently,
Right.
for sure.
Yeah.
And anybody else who survived, they'll be in their 70s, 80s. You're not still doing stuff. You're wheelchair bound, just like Avasarala is, and you may be a good sounding board or word of advice type, whatever. But
Right.
you're not going to be the main point of the story. And to me, that is a mistake when you give me a series that for 6 books was all about these particular people. I want to know about them.
Right.
That's who I started with.
Yeah. I fully agree. Yeah. I mean, there's problems that Bobby. I like Bobby, but the idea that she's still just as capable after 30 years, it just pushes it. Amos just as capable after 30 years. Uh,
And they give us a little bit of explanation with that in the sense of, one, them being two individuals who obviously were quite physically fit for the majority of their lives,
sure.
plus with it being the future, we know there's going to be certain medical advancements and everything
Sure.
else. But even still, with all this, if you expect me to think that a 55, 60-year-old man with medical enhancements is still taking down someone half his age
Right.
and in shape, no,
Yeah.
not happening.
Yeah.
Not happening.
If in 15 years sounds just about right, because part of the plot, these are the Earth and Mars are integrating their fleets, and the idea in the book is that like they've done it for a while now. I like the
Yeah.
idea of it being still kind of a conflict, like they're still trying to work out the kinks.
There's still
Um,
some tension there. We're making it work, but it's tenuous.
right, like we take turns on who from which side is in control, all kinds of stuff, and yeah, 30 years just feels like so much time.
It's a
It
way to kind of jump over a lot of those things too, because I feel like if they had done the jump and it was 10 or 15 years, these would be questions that people were asking. How do you set up your lines of succession? How do
mm,
you who's in control of what?
right,
How have Mars and Earth really resolved their issue? How are we dealing with the ring gate situation? Are all 1,300 gates now populated with people? I mean, even this book doesn't answer that question. It just says
right,
that there's 1,300 gates, and so far the only one that we're really concerned with is the Laconia gate.
right,
So I mean, they gave themselves so much, and then they just nixed it. They're like, nah, I don't want to really talk about that right now. So
right,
we're gonna cut all this out so that we don't have to.
right.
But yeah, I just thought that's a mistake, and the show, like it's done in the past, could fix this
Yeah,
by bringing the show back, and instead of saying 30 years, they could say 15 years
I totally
and
agree. Yep.
and go from there.
Right.
Tell the same story, but it's been 15 years.
Right.
And then that way we can still see our people, age them up a little bit, but now they're still plenty viable. We
Yeah.
ended the show at a, let's say, 35-year-old Holden,
Right.
right? Come back in 15 years, you know, we
Yeah.
got 50-year-old Holden.
Yeah.
Still works.
Yeah. And the one character that's obviously not in the books that's in the show or not in the show anymore is Alex Kamal. In the show, he has a son. I think it would, if we age up his son by say 10, 15 years, because he was what, maybe 10ish
I was gonna say
in
he
the
was about 10, 12 years old in
right.
the yeah.
Yeah, it'd be a fun introduction of like, hey, Alex's son is now our new pilot or something. He's the new hotshot. We miss Alex, and we're reliving the glory days of when
Yeah,
Alex was with us.
he was the last grad from the Martian Academy before it collapsed,
Yeah,
and they took it. He came to the Rocinante to find out about his father, and ended up
right,
just staying on.
right.
He's been on ever since.
And Naomi's son, at the end of both the book and the show, had left his father right before the finale. So
Right, we don't
Naomi's,
even know anything about, like, in this
I
book,
was,
book 7,
they
30
didn't
years
show him
later,
at all.
no mention of old Philip,
Yeah,
nothing. And there's not
or
even really
Inaros.
a blurb about Inaros. Like,
Yeah,
so many things that should have been touched on in a book that skips that much time. And I get that you need to do your world building again because you're setting us up for something else. But considering the fact that you made that such a major part of the first 6 books,
right.
to not have it discussed in a 30-year time gap, again, feel like that's a mistake.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I it's interesting to think about why they would have chosen to do it this way. Maybe it's just a, let me put it this way. 30 years as the choice feels arbitrary. There was nothing about choosing 30 years that felt necessary if
at
we had
least at this time, at least at this time,
right,
like I
true.
said, I'm going to try to give them the benefit of the doubt.
I
Maybe
am
something
too.
in book 8 will explain why it was 30 years, and we'll get some backstory here of some things with Duarte. Because I mean, we don't know anything really about what's been going on Laconia over the
I
30 years.
know.
Again, that was kind of a
Yeah,
big plot point of the first part of the book, is that, Laconia, when it got established, they put that blockade up around their gate. You can't get in. So
right.
we don't know what's been going on. So maybe at some point we're gonna get the dreaded flashback prequel nonsense that's gonna give us the download on what Laconia was up to
This whole
during this
time.
30 years. The progress, the setbacks, who was the rise and fall of power, the odd consistency of Duarte, because that's mentioned at least in part here, that when we see him, he's barely aged. No
Well,
one's
his
questioned
whole
that.
well, no, that's the whole idea. Maybe we should have talked about this a little bit more earlier, but the whole Duarte's whole plan is that he is going to make himself immortal, make himself the emperor of mankind, so that mankind never has to worry about the rough switches of power from one group to another. He is always the ultimate power. He never goes away. He lives forever. And so the protomolecule sustaining him. And so he will just be the emperor of mankind from now on. Which is like, it's the tyranny of good intentions. Oh, humanity has had wars and all these terrible conflicts. I'm going to implement my will via military on the rest of humanity, and they will obey me for all time because I'm never going to die. It's maybe it was. I know you said you had to kind of read through to the end
No,
when
I'm
he's
agreeing with you. Yeah.
yeah, because in the prologue when he's worked with Cortazar, he's like making him immortal. He mentioned something like that, and Singh is kind of talks about it a little bit, but I think it's more clearly maybe final at the end of the book made clear when Holden's like, "What the hell are you doing?" He's like, "Well, I'm gonna save humanity by being the emperor of mankind."
And apparently, and they didn't give us much of a description there, but apparently he's done something to himself that he
Yes.
looks awful. Because Holden was frightened, I would say, by how
Well,
he
I wouldn't
looked.
say he looked awful as much as they don't describe very much. When Holden sees him, he doesn't say, "Why do you have like a third arm?" or anything like that.
No,
He
but
just
he's like, "What is
immediately
wrong with you?"
knows.
Yeah,
Yeah, he
yeah.
says that. He's like, he immediately catches on. He immediately says, "Oh, you've been testing that stuff on yourself? Are you insane?" Um,
So
yeah.
we could maybe theorize, and from what we've seen on the show, perhaps his skin is like some veins are showing and they're pulsing blue or something
That's what I
on
think.
him,
Yeah.
something like that. You know, but it has to be something that everybody else would be used to, because we see that Duarte has met with a couple of people and none of them seem to react at all. to how he looks. So
They
they
must be
must
used to it.
yeah,
Yeah,
they must be
100%.
used to it,
I
or it's
imagine
something
he's
that becomes apparent when he's maybe in a certain location because we know that he's got hold it in this, black site, which is a site they describe briefly early on in the book,
yeah,
which it I have to admit, like the way it was talked about and what happened to that first scientist and everything else, kind of terrifying. But then they immediately left the area and we're gone. It's like, no, I need more. Go back in there. You give me a better breakdown of what's going on.
yeah,
But yeah, so maybe it's something like that. I don't know. But this also points out the fact that we have very little on the proto molecule.
yeah,
Upsetting.
yeah.
Upsetting.
The next two books need to
It
go
had better
into
be
it.
protomolecule heavy.
Yeah.
I mean, the first word better be protomolecule at this point. I need the first 200 pages to be a breakdown of what that stuff is,
Right.
what it's doing, who's
Right.
using it.
Yep.
I need it all. Man,
100%.
I'm getting to I love that alien aspect. They did such a great job of introducing something and then just being like, okay, that's it.
Well,
Never gonna talk about it again.
on that point, it's revealed by this point that what the protomolecule was, it was designed to hijack organic life, turn that organic life into a ring gate, and sync with the ring system. Which, like, it makes sense, and like the mystery of it throughout the books was always really fascinating. But then to hear the book describe it in such plain words, it was kind of a letdown. It was like the protomolecules just makes ring gates. I mean,
Well,
again, the
and
books were great. Go
but
ahead.
it
Go ahead.
but it does it but it also says that, the ring gates then lead you to other things.
Right.
Like Duarte found the one to Laconia where there was a spaceship partially constructed
Right.
there, and that's why he chose it because he saw a military installation with
Right.
advanced technology and he wanted to get his hands on it, and he knows it uses the protomolecule. So again, 1,300 gates out there. We don't know what all the gates lead to. We know that the one gate that they were calling where Illis was or New Terra or whatever that place was where everybody got, the blindness and the slugs and whatever else.
Hmm.
It was covered in lithium, but it
Yeah.
also had a system in place under the ground that we don't know what it was
Yeah.
ultimately supposed to do because they destroyed it.
Right.
But I mean, it seemed to be generating massive amounts of energy at one point. Well, what for?
Right.
What was it generating all the energy for?
Right.
We never saw what that was. I want that. Like go to
Go
a
back to
one of
Illis.
them or go back or go to another one. Like maybe find one that even though the gates were technically all formed at the same time, they find one gate that is older than the other ones. And this gate leads to the protomolecule creators planet. And from
Right.
there they're able
And
to
they've been
like,
hiding out all this time or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
something. Give me something.
Yeah.
Um I need more than what we're getting. And I'm tired of not getting it.
Yeah.
I will say.
Yeah. I totally believe. I honestly do. I think the next two books, the penultimate and then the finale, will definitely go there because I trust these authors. They have been so good so far.
Mhm.
I believe they'll go there. The oh, I was gonna say something I forgot. But anyway, can't remember what I was thinking of. Oh well. Yeah, I was gonna say
Well,
something
all
else.
this to say that I will say I've enjoyed this series overall. No, this book is not my favorite because, like I said, it's a lot of world building and it's in a direction I just don't want to go right now. But still a good entry into an overall very solid series.
Right.
I will go back and kind of review a couple of those parts that I was rushing through. But still, overall, I liked what we got here so far. I think I'm going to hold off before I start the next one, just because I like to take a little bit of a break there, But I am looking forward to continuing and then concluding this series and kind of doing our own little recap of what it was about.
All of it.
Um,
Yeah, that'd be
yeah,
great.
that's gonna be a wild one, and I mean we can even bring the show back into it a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, Arbus Raw is still my favorite character. Um, Speaking of characters, what's going on with Bobby and Amos? What's the
Yeah,
deal?
it was weird. I don't think they did a great job of, well, I think the idea was is that because Amos, who's had a platonic relationship with Clarissa Mao, and Clarissa Mao is dying and does die in this book. that he's kind of on edge, and then Bobby being the one who's trying to, she's now captain because Holden and Naomi want to move on and leave the ship. She's in this place where she's having to try and exert her authority, but it's not clear why he like loses his stuff with her. They had that big old fight scene where they beat the crap out of each other, which was a fun scene, but it did, yeah, it was kind of like, what's going on?
And in that scene, I feel like it was supposed to come off as a bit of catharsis for the both of them, but it doesn't feel like it. And I don't know if that's because it almost feels like they've been building Amos up as like that he's finally lost it. Like we've always known that Amos is unstable, and he was ultimately kind of controlled and reined in by Naomi and Holden. And now that he's lost them, he's lost Clarissa, all the other stuff that's going on. Maybe this is like the last straw for him, and I just don't feel like they did him the justice that they needed to with that whole fight scene. I mean, yeah, it
Right,
was fun, I guess. It was interesting to watch these two so-called powerful people. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe like this is something that we all kind of wanted when they were in their prime. No
right.
one wants to see a bunch of geriatrics throwing punches at each other. And,
Exactly.
and it's just like, come on, and the descriptions and everything else. Again, I give them credit, but it's just like, why didn't you do this when you were again in your prime, like when she
Right,
was fresh out of Miss Combat Marine badass, and he's
right,
just big hulking dude with the space gun. Go
right.
at it then, not now when you're both all soft and craggy, and she's taking longer to heal, and she's talking about getting crushed in the face with a wrench and whatever else. Like, come on, just. Mm.
Yeah. If they had been only 15 years removed, it would have made more
It
sense.
would have
Yeah.
still been viable, right? It would have still been viable, but you're giving me 30 years on these folks,
Right.
and you're still want me to think they can mix it up with the best of them. No, no, you can't.
Right.
So I don't really like that. But I just feel like also like Amos is also wholly missing for large chunks of this book too. And it could just be that, as the resident psychopath, there's really not much to do with him when
Yeah.
you're trying to fly under the radar, as it were. When they were
Well,
running and gunning from one bad situation to the next, there's a lot for a person like that to do.
right. Well, the one thing I would also say is that this book is probably Bobby's book. If Singh is our new character and we get his point of view quite a bit, Bobby is the other real main character. And because Bobby is presented as this really capable fighter, Amos's
Mhm.
role is reduced. And then Clarissa, who's also a mechanic, he's reduced. So he's got other characters that are helping hold up part of the plot that he would normally hold up all by himself. So yeah, it feels like to make Amos have something to do in the plot, they made him angry and have that lashing out scene, but it was like forced that they just
Yeah.
needed to give him something to do. Um, I would quickly point out I counted both Alex, Naomi, and Amos all have one chapter from their POV in the book. I'm sorry, actually Naomi I think has more than one. But it's been a while. It was book what 4 you really liked
Mhm.
because they had the or was it book 5 where they
Book
split
five,
off?
where they split off, and
That's right,
it's
book 5.
everybody was trying to do the whole what would X and X do, and
Yes.
failing miserably and realizing they really needed each other and coming back
Right.
together. Yeah.
Yeah. And Amos doesn't really necessarily have that. He doesn't necessarily say, "What would Clarissa
Oh, he
do?" or
no,
something.
not
Yeah.
Clarissa. He does say it at one point in that book, in book four. He does say that he tried to recall, what he thought Holden would do in a situation, and he just kind of laughed because he realized he'd never be able to figure out what Holden would do, and
Right.
just kind of went back to doing what he was going to do. So
Right.
yeah. Um, but yeah, I just feel like underutilized character, and part of that may be because again there was nothing that allowed for any kind of comedic elements in this book either, which
Yeah.
typically in the other books that fell to Amos. And it's almost like because he is again our resident sociopath, atypical things he finds funny. So it
Right.
gives you a way to inject humor into a very tense
Right.
dramatic situation. There wasn't really a whole lot of tense, dramatic
This
situations
is a
here.
low tension, not a
Yeah,
high tension
yeah.
book. Yeah.
So there was a lot less of that for him here.
Right.
So interesting way to kind of handle your character, but still, um, for a character that did become a fan favorite for a lot of people.
Oh, he's still my favorite,
Yeah.
hands down.
Well, I know I'm just saying for a character that was such a favorite for a lot of people, he's underutilized here,
Yeah,
and
he
we could have
is. He
done with
really is.
a little bit more Amos, and a little less crazy overall.
Right.
So,
100%.
so I know what I said about my feelings towards this book. What about you? Overall, did you enjoy this one? Is this one that you feel like if you were to ever reread the series, would you skip it? Would you come back to it? What do you
It's
think?
actually a good point. Of all of the books, if I were to skip one, yes, this is the skippable one. It is a tie-over novel. I do feel like whatever tension we like, this is there. If this is book is supposed to be building to a finale, but it's transferring us from everything that happened in those first six books to get us to that finale. Um, and as we've been describing it, like it says, it's low tension. There's a simmering tension, not the bombastic tension we love. Um, it seems like there were some plot elements that weren't maybe as thought out as you would hope
Hmm.
for. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know. I'm wondering if they like they had got to book six and then they were kind of stuck. Maybe. I mean, I do feel like they've done a great job of setting things up. It's not like the Martian separatist movement that went off to Laconia has been set up since what, book five. So it's not surprising in that sense, but maybe they hadn't worked out all the kinks yet, and they got to this book in. Actually, you know what? I'll back that up because one of the reasons I love the show so much is because they seem to do a good job of reworking some plot elements to fit better into the story. Um, so I maybe that's what happened. This is more of a first draft
Yeah,
kind of version.
and that's what I said earlier, and I think I think that coming back to the TV show would be a great way for them to fix some things about this book, like the time skip for one. They
Right.
can really address that. The use of certain characters, giving us a little bit more backstory on what's been going on Laconia and with Duarte and the experiments. Give us a little bit more on Sing to make him maybe a little bit more relatable, personable. I mean, for as much as we did get on Sing, there's just not a lot. So unfortunately, it does make him seem very one dimensional. In fact, I found Admiral Trejo to be a bit more of an interesting character than
Mhm.
Sing, and he was barely in it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that to me is another reason why I didn't really like the character of Sing. It's like, how is this person who really just kind of passes by and gives a couple of words of advice or whatever, or directives to this other very central, very main character, seem to have more resonance than this other one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing that would have really redeemed Singh's character is if they had, for example, instead of him being executed by his chief of security, like off screen, basically, if he had somehow been exiled and had to redeem himself in a future book, then his character could have had something. But his character is just a foil, and that's why I think he was set
Mhm.
up. He was just there. I brought this reference up to my group of friends recently, talking about something else. But in the Dune books, um, Baron Harkonnen sets up his nephew Raban to fail ruling Dune because he wants Fade
That's
Routha to come
correct.
in as the
He
savior.
does.
And so the whole time Singh was here and he was struggling with ruling, I was like, they have someone else as a backup who's going to come in and be the savior. The first guy, we're so sorry, the first guy failed, but now we have someone better or something. And they
Well,
kind of
and I mean,
hinted that because go ahead.
they do, but I was looking at something I was going to talk about in a minute. But they do, but then at the same time, there is no second guy. It's always Duarte. I think the whole point is that Singh is supposed to fail, so that when Duarte finally makes his big reveal, it's like, oh, this guy was, and they kind of say that even in the book. We're going to honor his sacrifice. He did what he was
Yes.
supposed to do,
Right.
and we're going to honor his sacrifice. But it's going to be that he got you guys started. He didn't implement everything precisely the way that he was supposed to.
Right.
That's our bad. Here's what we really want. And as your new benevolent emperor, we will apologize for Sing,
Right.
but we're still going to continue on with this other thing. So he becomes a
Yes.
necessary stepping stone, a bridge for Duarte really to make his way into that emperor status.
Right. Yeah. That is my theory with his character. And the reason I bring up the whole like maybe he could have been redeemed is because he's always presented as like I feel like he's presented as a guy who's supposed to be like a good dude. Like he's it's his circumstances and the people he works under that f him over. Like it really
Mhm.
is. They whenever he goes to meet Duarte or the admiral whose name you just mentioned, but I don't remember off the top of my head.
Trejo.
Um, Trejo, he every time he meets them, they're friendly, they're outgoing, they're personable, and he's always presented as being like nervous on the inside. And I need to remember to do that myself, and then failing to do it whenever he has a chance. And like I think his character would have been fun to watch as he had matured.
Yeah.
Like that was the idea behind Holden is he matured. He was originally the guy who just blurted everything he thought he needed to say, but now he's matured. He's more willing to
Yeah.
be thoughtful about what he says. So I'm kind of sad that his character was kind of done away with. He was just kind of a one-off, but he did do his role. I mean, it makes his character made sense in the story. So
Yeah, no, it's character definitely makes sense. I'm just saying that, there I feel like we need I guess I've become of the opinion that, especially when you're doing villains of any kind, that in order to make your villain more compelling, we need more of a background. We need to
mm-hmm.
understand their motivations a bit more. And while they gave us seemingly a lot, we don't really get to see much of it. Like, we know he has the wife and the child, but we don't ever get to see them having any kind of major interactions together. It's a little bit of stuff before he's whisked off to
That's
go
true.
and do his job.
Yep. Yep.
We see that he's got some kind of relationship with Trejo and Duarte and so forth. But again, beyond the one meeting with Duarte and then a few little flippant things with Trejo, we don't get to see how that really develops. And then
Right.
even with his own people, when that one lady that he gets rid of with Overstreet, who comes in later on, we
Yep.
don't really get to see a development of anything between these characters to make Sing personable.
Yeah,
Not
that's
enough.
true.
Not
There's
enough.
no friends in the military who come
Right.
along on this mission that he had relationships with. That I
Right,
mean,
no personal confidant that came up in the ranks with him who, that classic story, they were neck and neck, but for whatever
right,
reason, Singh always edged him out just a little bit, but he respects his opinion, so
a
he's
friendly
always like
rival.
his
Yeah,
right, he's his official, sometimes unofficial number 2. They bounce things off each other, a balancing foil, something
and
that
maybe
would have
the
made him more.
rift in their relationship is this story or something.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
anything like that that would have made him more relatable and identifiable would have been
right.
great here, and we don't have it.
And that's again all of that. All of what we just said just backs up the idea for me that he's set up to fail.
Yeah.
Maybe it was a plot decision. They don't have enough time to set up all the relationships. That would make sense, but at least
Only
within this.
I would agree that it would only make sense if they knew from the get-go this is gonna be a TV show, but it's a book. There's plenty
Right.
of time for them to do it, and they just
Well,
did.
I mean, if the books have all been somewhere between 5 and 600 pages, this one's 550, so it's like smack dab right in the middle of what they normally go with. So if they were to add stuff, they could have maybe fit it in, but they would be kind of already edging toward their normal book length. So my only point is that within the story itself, it feels like he's set up. Maybe there's some out of the book reasons. The authors had reasons for doing what they did, but within the story itself, I felt he was set up early on from the basically as soon as he got to the station and things were starting to sour. I was already on the like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
he's gonna mess something up and they're gonna send his. I didn't think they were gonna kill him. I thought they were gonna maybe he was gonna turn good and like decide that he needed to be against Duarte or something. Like those moments when he's talking with Holden, and Holden's like, "You haven't really thought out your worldview yet, have you?" I really thought that was going to be the impetus for him to be like, "Oh, you're right," him
Yeah.
start growing as a character. But anyway, he doesn't.
No, he doesn't. Unfortunately, he does not.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think we've pretty much wrapped it up here on this book. Again, go ahead.
I just
You
want to say one quick thing. We already
Yes.
mentioned it, but in the episode "The Little Ship," which was 2 episodes ago, I mentioned that this book felt a lot like that episode. There were a lot of similarities. We have a group of people who are working subvertly to overcome a hostile force that has taken over the ship or the station. There's the conquerors have a younger group that is trying to rule at the even though subordinates are supposedly from the older group, and the new guys are not having the old guys tell them what to do. Um,
And so they're
it's a
not really
slow
taking.
burn.
Mhm.
Yeah, there were just a lot of fun little like, oh my gosh, this story just felt like the I'm reading the Expanse, and then we watch the Star Trek episode every week, and like, bam, these two just like synced up so well. I think I said more back during the episode, so if anyone wants to hear my thoughts, that was about 2 episodes
Well,
ago.
no,
The little
that's a
chips.
good point, like you said, because even in that episode, we saw the scene where the crew, having been captured, are now being put to the task of fixing the ship. We see there are two different groups of Jem'Hadar, the old guard that were born
Right,
in the Gamma Quadrant, and the new ones that are in the Alpha Quadrant. The Alpha Quadrant ones are eager to claim their victory and move on, whereas the Gamma Quadrant ones are like, don't count your chickens.
right,
And then within that group of Starfleet officers, there are some that are trying to fix the ship, whereas the other ones are directly, subverting those efforts,
right,
committing acts of sabotage while
right,
also trying to take over.
right,
And then you have the smaller third group, which is literally our crew on the shuttle, who basically make things happen
right,
because they are small enough to go unnoticed.
right.
And
Yeah,
so then in this book, our parallels, you have the overwhelming force, which is the Laconian military. You've got the resistance that's actually trying to destroy the station or disrupt their control anyway. And
right,
then you've got Drummer and her group that they can't seemingly do a whole lot, but they
right,
are trying,
right,
unbeknownst to our resistance group because they don't have any
right.
contact.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And then finally at the end, it turns out that the old Jim Hadar was correct and the older Laconians were correct about what to do. Well, the new young guns. It's interesting. Their reasoning is flipped. On the Star Trek episode, it turns out that the Alpha Quadrant Jim Hadar dude is giving uh, Cisco and the others too much leeway. He doesn't realize the threat that they pose, and the old guy is the one who's like, "Nah, we got to like kill them now. Like they're gonna threaten.
Yeah,
We
get rid
can't.
of
We
them.
can't."
Get rid of them
We,
now. Yeah.
but in the book, it's we got to give a light hand. If we're gonna become the new rulers, we got to have a paternalistic edge to our conquering, not the hard hand or heart heavy handed way of,
Mhm.
of occupations in the past. Um,
And you've
anyway,
lost our
yeah,
people because you were too heavy-handed. You should have used the carrot when you used the stick.
exactly. So I just found that so fun to just be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm able to find so many direct parallels in these two stories
Well, of course, because
years
Star
apart.
Trek's been around for decades and it influences so many things, whether people really want to acknowledge it or not. It does. It influences so much,
Right,
and that's one of the best things about watching any sci-fi to me is finding the way that all these stories relate and interconnect. Like we were just mentioning earlier. This book also reminded me of Firefly because that whole series is about a human federation that's kind of moving through space, colonizing planets and terraforming them and depositing people to live there but still be a part of the federation, whereas the crew of the Firefly, they're all about being free. They fought a war of independence, they lost,
right,
and rather than still giving up, they have now basically become pirates,
right,
outlaws living on the outskirts of society,
right,
making a living running contraband basically.
right.
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the setup here with this new group coming in and overwhelming everybody, and now we've got our new band uh of pirates. They don't know they're going to be pirates yet, but they're getting close.
Right,
But yeah, that's what this was.
right. Yeah, yeah. Firefly. We talked about it before. Great show. Great
Then
show.
yeah, way ahead of its time. Ended long before it should have. They did the movie, which was great, and it's one of those that it burns brightly in the hearts of all fans, but it will never come back. And we will just have to make our peace with it. It will never happen, guys. Nathan Fillion will never wear the infamous brown coat again unless it's for cosplay. So
Yeah, yeah.
sorry,
100%.
won't happen.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I think that's going to do it for us when it comes to this book, Persepolis Rising. If you haven't read it, go ahead and pick it up. I know Barnes and Noble has it. I'm pretty sure Half Price Books has it. And again, you can find the audio version anywhere you happen to listen to audiobooks or podcasts, like I did it on Spotify. I will say just real quick, since we're into other things, um, another book series that I had been reading was from James Patterson, and it was the Alex Cross book series. You might remember that character in James Patterson from the movie adaptations of his books, like Kiss the Girls and Along Came a Spider. There are several books in the Alex Cross series. Kiss the Girls, for as disturbing as that movie is, if you're going to read that book, be careful because there are some very disturbing descriptive imagery in there. And
Of the murder victims and such, or
oh yeah,
mm.
and there are things I was not prepared for. And I believe I read that book, I think I was a junior in high school.
Oh, really?
I was not ready. That's all I will say. I was not ready.
I'm just gonna say it now. I may have said it to you before. I know we're wrapping this up, but
Yeah, it's
I
fine.
hate James Patterson. That man puts out a book like a week. I
Oh,
mean,
okay. He used to. He doesn't anymore. But
well,
you're right. There was a time when that man was just cranking them out, man. It
I
was
mean,
like
I
every.
worked for a brief time at a bookstore, and I am not lying. Like every month, we had a new book from him.
Oh yeah, I believe it. I
And
remember when I.
his chapters are 2 pages long. I am not
Yes,
lying. Pull up a James
yes.
Patterson novel. Half that novel is blank pages because his chapters. We have a new
It
chapter.
says
We have a
right, chapter 1, and it's like big bold print right at the top, and then you've got like this space, and then the words for the chapter actually start, and then you turn the page, chapter 2.
yeah.
What
That's
happened?
I am not
What,
lying.
what do you
Uh,
mean chapter 2? I
Now what he
think he
does is he like gets other people to write books, and he basically puts his stamp of approval on them. Basically, like he
I
edits them
well,
more than writes them. I guess.
I heard that he does use ghostwriters,
Hmm.
and then there's like another kind of writer that he uses where they kind of work in tandem,
Well,
like
my
he'll write
understanding is like he has like this whole like production where like he has like 20 people under him writing plots. Like I guess he sits around with these people and they come up with the plots together and he says, "Okay, you go write the book." And when they print the book, it's James Patterson and there are so many James Patterson ands.
there
Um
are now. There were not always. I will give the
well,
man
sure,
credit.
yeah,
It was not always that way. I remember
right.
when, because I am a fan of James Patterson.
Right.
But when my fandom first started, it was just James Patterson.
I
There was nothing else. And so, but even then I did find it odd that, I mean, the man without fail, you're right, like every month there was a new James Patterson book, and I just
right.
had to go and get it. I've since lost the majority of my James Patterson collection, much to
Okay.
my dismay.
Mm,
So I was going back and I was trying to, find them and get into them again.
right.
And I found my old copy of Kiss the Girls, and I almost threw that one out. 'Cause that book, it's good, but it's disturbing. And I was like,
Really?
I honestly,
Hmm.
I didn't want my kid to find it. So that
Oh,
that was
right.
why. So yeah,
Gotcha.
just don't go there if you're not ready for it. Um,
Gotcha.
all I all I will
And
say is, as a just a teaser for why,
right.
there is a part in there about a snake being put into someone's body while they're still alive, and it was a lot for me to take in at that time.
I don't even think that's possible, frankly, but who knows?
Yeah, well,
I mean,
yeah.
I haven't read the description of what happened, so who knows?
Well, so to more detail, they had sewn the snake's mouth shut, and then they were forcing the snake in, and the
through
person
an
was still
through like
alive.
their mouth or
No,
like they cut them open somewhere and
no.
no, okay, never mind. I
Yeah,
don't need anything else.
there you go. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I just want to be very clear before we finalize. I don't hate James Patterson as much as I envy his success and
Oh
therefore
yeah, yeah,
turn
yeah,
that into
yeah, yeah.
hatred. So to be clear,
Um, so yeah, so there's those. The reason I brought those books up is because I am a fan of the character of Alex Cross, and there is a new show starting on November 17th on Amazon Prime called Cross, and it is all about that character. And it's an actual show, not a dramatization or a interviewing James Patterson thing. It's about that. I think it's about the very first book, and they are going through the character. So I would suggest going and checking it out. I have not looked into everything that the show is about. I did watch the trailer on YouTube, which again you can find just called Cross,
Hmm.
and it looks pretty good. I have to say, I like what I saw in the trailer so far. I'm looking forward to watching the series when it drops on November 17th, and hopefully you all will as well.
Right.
In Trek news, the Section 31 movie is slated to come out next year, 2025, as is the new season of Strange New Worlds. Lower Decks has officially premiered. As a matter of fact, the fifth and final season has dropped. It came out on the 24th of October. So if you haven't watched it yet, you can go to Paramount Plus, check that out. I actually have not watched it yet. I was waiting because I like to do two episodes back to back. So
Hmm.
I'm waiting until next or this coming Thursday, and then I'll watch both of them.
Hmm.
Am sad to see that it is going to end. There have been several petitions out to try to save the show, but as far as I know, they've met to no avail. So don't know what's going to happen when this show ends, but when this show ends, that means that there'll only be one Star Trek show that's active, and that's Strange New Worlds. Again, the Prodigy is on Netflix, and by all accounts, it's done. Again, there's a petition going around for that one as well to try to save it, but again, no one knows. The Starfleet Academy show has been greenlit, but I heard that production had stopped on it. No one knows why. Now, I'll keep checking just to see, but that show was still so far in just production and everything else. It probably wasn't. We probably weren't getting the first episode of that until 2026 at the earliest, anyway. So don't put too much stock in that at all.
Gotcha.
Other than that, I think that's going to do it for us. Is there anything else? Oh, great other sci-fi news. Sorry, last thing, promise. For those of you who are fans of Battlestar Galactica, the reboot that came out in the 2000s, you will remember the character of Colonel Saul Tigh, played by Michael Hogan.
Hmm.
A few years ago, Michael Hogan was in an accident, took a fall, had some severe brain damage from the fall, had several strokes, things like that. And there was a time when they thought that he was not going to recover. Well, folks, he made his first return to the convention circuit just this week. There are videos of him out where, even though he is in a wheelchair, he is talking. He gave interviews. He shook hands. He interacted with the various other crew members or castmates that were there. So they said he's still doing a lot of physical therapy, but at least he seems to be on the mend. So
Good.
great news for Michael Hogan. Very glad to see him.
Which character
And
was he again?
he played the first officer, the XO, Colonel Saul Tigh.
Oh, Saltai, that guy.
Yes,
Got it. Got it. Got
yes,
it. Yeah. Yeah. That
yes.
curmudgeonly Saltai. I remember that.
Exactly. So yeah, so he was there. I was very glad to see him, and see him, talking and interacting with people. He's not quite, back to himself or up to speed, but from what I understand, the accident, what happened to him was pretty severe. They thought they were going to lose him. So it's good that he's back and able to, get out and do things again. So
Gotcha.
hopefully he continues to recover. He continues with his rehab, and we're able to see him up and on his feet here really soon.
Gotcha.
So yeah, so that's it. That is all my
I
news.
don't know if you got a chance. I sent you a link. Apparently, Katie Sackhoff has a podcast, and she was interviewing.
Jonathan Frakes.
That's right. That's the one episode I sent you. I didn't watch it myself, but I saw it and I was like, "This has got to be
I
like heaven for you." So here you
I
go.
have not watched it yet because I was trying to do Persepolis Rising and some other stuff, but I do have it slated to watch because and I was just talking about Jonathan Frakes. I think he's great.
Yeah.
He's so much fun. He's so open and warm and welcoming to people. He's
Yeah.
always treated his fans very well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that I can't wait to watch. I know there's a segment in there where he does talk about the interpersonal relationships of the various crews, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and because he had the chance to work with all of them, Next
Yeah,
Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, all of them, because he either starred in an episode or he directed or both. So yeah, I can't wait to see his take on all the crews and what he says and stuff.
right,
So.
right.
But all right, guys, that is going to do it for us for this episode, this nice little After Dark that we did. We will be continuing the Expanse series with the next book, which is Book 8, Tiamat's Wrath. We're going to give this series a little bit of a break, as we customarily do in between books, but then we'll let you know when we start Book 8. And so, yeah, go get it, check it out, and we'd love to hear what you think as well. So let us know. But until next time, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.